What's up, guys? So today's podcast is going to be a list of 10 smart qualities or 10 qualities of a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner. This will be a two-part episode that we'll be getting into that originally was an email that I sent out. So some of you guys maybe know the list, and we'll be going a little bit deeper into it. I hope you guys enjoy the podcast, and thank you for joining us today. As always, thanks to our sponsors that help make the podcast possible, Charlotte's Web. If you guys want to check them out, check out charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to get 20% off your order. If you've never used CBD before, try it out and see what it does for you. I actually had one of my students who just recently, he just started taking CBD again. And it's funny because he originally took CBD and he said he didn't really notice anything. And then he's been trying it. He's doing about, I think he's doing 50 milligrams of CBD a day. And I think, I don't know what he was trying before, but he said he just started doing 50. And he said it's been about a week. And all of a sudden he's starting to notice certain things have like related to his mind, we'll say it that way, have kind of chilled out a little bit.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was interesting because, again, he originally was like, it's not working. Then he started using CBD again. And now he's, enjoying the effects of it, and he's kind of positive for it. So it's cool. So
Awesome.
I like seeing that stuff. So again, check it out, guys. Try it out for a month. I would encourage you to get a tincture. See what you think. They make 17 milligram tinctures, or like my student, you can get like one that's like 50 or more as well. And give it a try and see what kind of effects it has. Again, you need to give it at least a few days to a week before you make it like kind of a make or break the decision. Give it a little bit of time to sort of get saturated in your body, and then kind of see what you notice from there. A lot of times the effects are very subtle, but in some cases they can be kind of like big, depending on the situation that you're running into. But check it out. What's that?
Yeah, like even just like you said, like taking it, and then like I don't know if anything, and then you get off of it, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, there are some things that impact. I didn't quite notice at the time because it's kind of maybe gradual, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and guys, also thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. Matt at Epic Roll makes really cool jiu-jitsu gear and apparel. So if you guys are in the market for that sort of thing, whether it's a t-shirt, a gi, some rash guards, or shorts, you can check them out at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu for 15% off the order at checkout. And again, if you're a no-gi grappler and you like no-gi like I do, check out his Velcro-less shorts. I don't know what else to call them. Non-Velcro shorts. The thing that doesn't make anything... There's none of that stuff. And they're incredibly comfortable. They're incredibly mobile. And again, I really like him. And it was why this past year I used him to make my custom jiu-jitsu gear. And while I'll use him again to do the same. So check him out at epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is jiu-jitsu. So it's 15% off the order. And guys, also thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. So the lie you're often told about investing is that it isn't for people like you. It's really complicated. You need a lot of money up front, and all of that's just flat out wrong. In fact, easy and accessible investing happens every day on the Acorns app. Acorns helps you save and invest your future and your family's future, and it does this by rounding up your spare change from your daily purchases. Then Acorns takes all that spare change that you've been saving up and invest it into your portfolios that you can grow with time. On average, Acorns users invest an extra $490 a year just from spare change. And it adds up. $490 invested for 20 years at a hypothetical 6% rate of return comes out to be $20,000. And all that's just from your spare change alone. Start putting your spare change to work and get a bonus $20 when you invest $5 and sign up with the Acorns app. You can do that by going to acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. And you'll get, again, you invest $5 and you get $20 bonus. So grow your oaks with Acorn. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We'll be uploading a seminar, actually. So one of my seminars I did a couple years ago that'll be going into some different stuff that'll be uploaded in there coming up soon. So any of you guys that are already Patreon members, you'll get that get access to that soon. And for anybody that's not, you can get access to that as well as content from gosh, what number of podcasts are we on now?
200, and this is 204, I believe.
204. So 204 podcasts that we've added something from almost every one of those podcasts.
I think actually we started, I think we started like at 30 something. And I think what happened was we had, oh man, it was
it Richie?
No, Richie was one of the first guys.
Was it Stuart?
No, Stuart, yeah. Stuart Cooper. And like we actually, it was funny. We were doing the podcast, as soon as we cut off, we got done like officially filming, we got into a whole other like 30-minute episode. And I was like, man, this is such good stuff. Cause he was it's interesting how people kind of almost like, all right, cameras off, but they relax, and you're just like, you see the side of them, you're like, whoa, and it's just like it's awesome. So you see that sometimes. You see people get silly or just kind of a little bit like you get to see a different side of them, which is cool. Not that they're not being genuine, because they're always like they're awesome, but it's like you see something, maybe they're a little more goofy.
The pressure's off.
Yeah.
You know,
so it's
because
cool.
a lot of times that's a situation, right? A lot of times when the pressure's on, we sometimes we're a little bit more apprehensive to do certain things.
Sure.
Whereas once the pressure's off and you're relaxed, you just let it fly.
That's right.
And again, so if you guys want to check that out, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, and you can get access to that today. And guys, if you want to join my email list, which is again is where this sort of thing that we're getting into today originally came from. And you can get access to 3 free ebooks that get into drilling, game planning, and workouts and at-home study for Jiu-Jitsu. You can get all of those, and you'll also get access to my daily email, again, by going to jujitsu.net/join, JOIN, and join today, and you can unsubscribe at any time. And guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast. All right, guys, so let's jump into this little list here. So this was originally an email, so if you guys were or if you are on my Chew Crew email list at jujitsu.net/join, then you got this the first time, obviously, and it was well received. And I figured what we would do here today is we would just kind of open up and go a little deeper into the different things. So originally it was 20 different qualities of a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner. And we're going to break it down into a 2-part episode. So we'll do 10 today, and then we'll do 10 the next time we have this episode with Eugene and I. So jumping into it, the first one is that smart jiu-jitsu practitioners are motivated by their long-term goals, but not short-term gratifications or feelings. And I think this is a big deal for everyone. Anytime you take on any big activity, right? I mean, all of us are understanding of this, because there's like little short-term wins and stuff like that come along the way. And sometimes they don't come along the way. And you've got to be sort of focused on what you're doing long-term and be motivated by that more so than the short-term wins. I mean, the short-term wins are fun, and when they happen, enjoy them, but you've got to be focused for like what the long-term goal is, because with anything that you do that's worthwhile, it's generally going to take a long time. It's generally not going to be an instant thing, especially if it's going to be something substantial, right? And so you've got to be focused and understand what that long-term goal is, and that's what you're shooting for. And a lot of times, if you can sort of really get a good vision as to what your long-term goal is, then when you have those days where you're not so motivated, you can think about what you're chasing, and you can use that as the motivation that you need to push yourself through. Because everybody talks about the fact that, you know, they lose motivation sometimes, and they're not motivated to do something. But again, if you're motivated by your long-term goals and not sort of the short-term feelings, then it's not so difficult to continue going.
Well, what about like creating goals? So let's talk about, because short-term goals are great.
They are.
They're good as like kind of feeders, but you want them to align, you know, what you're doing. What are some like specific things that you look at in a long-term goal? Like how do you write like a long-term goal for jiu-jitsu or anything like that for yourself?
You know, I think sometimes like I've seen people go like SMART goals, and it's like they're, you know, they're measurable and and I'm sure there's some scientific backing to back that up. For me, it's not nearly that like detailed it's detailed, but it's not, I don't go through like a checklist. For me, it's simply like, I've got to like long-term wise, I've got to find something that I enjoy chasing, right? Like, what is it that I really want? I got to know what that is. So for instance, like when, you know, I was starting to stash a little bit of money away to buy a house, right? Jess and I came together and we kind of wrote out like, what are the things that we want in a home? Right. And like when we were looking at houses together, we were like, you know, we were looking at all kinds of open houses and going to showings and stuff like that, and sort of finding things that we liked, things that we didn't like, things that had to be there, things that didn't have to be there. And we sort of came up with an idea of here's what we really want. Right. And obviously, a house purchase is a big purchase for most people. And
Sure.
it's funny how quickly people go through that process and don't really give it its due, right? They just jump into it. But
Mm-hmm.
even though it's like for most people, it's their biggest financial decision, and they just jump right into it. Anyway, I'll digress. The And so we found out, we kind of found a vision. Here's what we want, and one of the things that we wanted was some land, because she wanted her horse and everything else. And then, like, when we found our house, like, there were things that it didn't have, but all of the must haves it had. Now, during that process, it was kind of discouraging, because we would, look at houses, and we would sometimes find something we like, but it was too expensive, and again, could we have afforded it? We could have, but then it would have put a damper on our lifestyle that we wanted to live.
For sure.
And so we didn't want to do that. And then sometimes it would be, this beautiful acreage with a nice barn, but then the house would be completely in shambles or something, right? And so we kind of had to keep our eye on the prize, what we were chasing. Another example was with YouTube, right? When I started getting into YouTube, especially when it started to grow, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted with it. And YouTube's it's a mess, because especially if you're doing it and you actually enjoy doing it and you're trying to put out useful content, it's something where you put a lot of thought into it, and sometimes the videos completely bomb. They
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
because you're like thinking, oh man, this is going to be, and I understand you understand this as well, right? But you put so much work into something, you put so much thought into it. You're like, man, this is going to be a great one. This is super helpful to me. So I'm excited to share it. And I wonder how people are going to receive it. And like nothing, right? And then you get discouraged. But then if you remember, okay, why am I doing this? Okay, here's the
Mhm.
long-term goal. And with jujitsu, it's the same thing, right? You can get discouraged by these little, things that happen along the way, or you can lose motivation along the way. But if you know what you're chasing, you can get it. And so for me, I just create a really clear vision as to what I want. And I mean, when I say clear, I mean, I visualize, I'll close my eyes, and I try to get down to like the granular level. Like, what does it look like with me being in that place, right? Because if I can get a really clear vision of what it is I'm chasing, granted, it's always going to look different when you get to it. But if you have a clear vision of it, it becomes exciting to chase after. So when you wake up in the morning and you have to go do this thing, whatever, you close your eyes and you can view it. It's a little bit easier to hang on to. Um, and there's an interesting thought experiment. It's called It's called I think it's thought anchoring. Yeah, so I don't know what the scientific data is on it or whatever, but it's been useful to me. So you start off with thinking about something that you did that you're really proud of, that gets you excited, whatever that might be. Maybe you accomplished something, whatever it might be, and you really zero in on that idea. And then once you start to kind of like almost try to relive it in your brain, right? Then think about the vision that you're trying to assemble for yourself, and sort of connect those two together, right? So get yourself in a state where you're really excited about doing something really cool, and then try to connect it to that, to create a vision for yourself. And that's something that I do anytime I try to get a new vision for myself, because you hit a goal, and a long-term goal, and then you've got to set another one later on. And can't just be complacent forever. And
Yeah.
so that's something that I do with it. But I don't do all the necessarily the measurable, all this other stuff. I mean, it's measurable to a degree. You can
Sure.
tell if you get it, but it's more about me creating a vision that gives me a visceral response in my body that I get excited about.
You almost visualize that kind of from what you were expressing. Like you're almost like you're closing your eyes, you're trying to experience it, trying to get all your senses involved, just to like really get, just so you know, it's like standing on the podium with a gold
Mhm.
medal. What's that going to feel like to me, right? How am I
Yeah.
going to feel with the sense of accomplishment? How maybe even how am I going to feel standing up higher, standing up taller,
Mhm.
in front of people, whatever. So that I
Yeah.
think is like it makes it more realistic in some ways, and I think you can make it more of a more desirable because you can
Mhm.
kind of feel it. You kind of know what you kind of have a sense of what it's all about.
Yeah, well, like, here's a great example of it being used. I didn't realize what I was doing when I was younger. I was just doing it. But when I first lost a bunch of weight, over the course of a summer, so I was chasing after, it would be considered a long-term goal in the sense of a teenager. It was like a year-long type of thing. So after my wrestling season of my junior year, my coach, one of the coaches, he said, "Man, Tugboat," because that was my wrestling nickname. He said, "Tugboat, you would be a monster at 189." And at the time I was a chunky kid at 215. It
Yeah.
was the weight class. And I remember as soon as the wrestling season was over, I was immediately in the gym working out and doing everything else. And I remember during the summer, I would get up in the mornings and go for runs. And that was a nightmare for me for a ton of different reasons. It is what it is. And I remember what I would do is anytime I would sort of think about not wanting to run or not wanting to work out or whatever it was, right? I would close my eyes and I would think about being on the top of the podium, and I would think about what it would be like to have a gold medal around my neck, just like my teammates, and what it would be like to be in that place. And then I would say, is it worth it to go for this run to get that? Of course it is. So I would go for a run, that kind of thing.
No, it's great. That's a great point. I mean, it really drives the point home of like really involving not just your thought process, but the feeling of it, actually experience it, just the goals. Real quick, if people are curious what a SMART goal is, we kind of brushed on it. So SMART goals are basically ways to kind of help you write goals that maybe are, I don't want to say better, but I don't know, just kind of a better.
Here's the deal. I don't know. If it works for you, like, because I know everybody knows, if it works for you, do it. Like, I mean, it always comes down to that. Like, there's so many ways to live life, right? Sure. There's so many ways to skin the cat as far as improving ourselves. Whether or not it's the best way, who the hell knows? When it comes down to it, how is it working for you?
Yep.
But yes, SMART goals.
So they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based.
Right.
So kind of, I mean, it's like a good framework to follow. It maybe is a way to give you more of a clear goal. Like if you can look at those things, it gives you maybe more a clear goal. So that's kind of what SMART goals are. But I thought that was a, kind of something you can look at. So,
I think SMART goals are good for, like, especially if you have some level of experience in the field that you're in. I think it's great because it's like for instance, like if you're self-employed or if you're your own boss, like kind of like we are in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
It's good to have those sometimes where it's time-based. You give yourself a deadline, and it's relevant and all that other stuff. But I think sometimes if you're trying to do something you've never done before, like it can be like really like, I don't know how long this is going to take. Who the hell knows, right? Like, so in that point, you just got to be driven by something that's far deeper than simply like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to achieve this on August the 1st of 2000 and whatever. It's like, well, maybe not, because you're trying to do something you've never done before. So it's probably going to be way different than what you expect.
Yeah. All right. So the second second quality that you talked about, can focus on a particular technique for a long time. All right. So, which is great. Obviously, you have, again, looking at goals. If you have a technique of a certain goal, whether it's a sweep or submission or guard pass, what have you, you start there, and then you kind of, I would say you kind of work your way back, like kind of almost like we had Sean Williams come in and teach the body lock course, and he showed you where the end product was. Like, here's where you want to be. Now let's kind of back engineer this thing, which I thought was a great way to look at achieving a goal or achieving, a technique, right? The question I have for you, and this is probably different for everyone, skill level, time-based, whatever, what's a long time, or what's adequate time for focusing on a particular technique?
And see, there's no exact time that you can't, I don't think that you can give it a sort of, well, it's 3 weeks or it's 2 months or whatever, because everybody's
10,000 rep. Idea,
well, so we'll talk about that 10,000 hour rule, because I just read a book on it, and it was written by some guys who actually did a lot of those studies that the whole thing was based off of. And a lot of times the 10,000 hour rule kind of gets it. It's not that it gets it wrong, but it's a little deceptive, right? So this kind of goes along with being able to focus on a technique. So basically, in a lot of times when they talk about the 10,000 hour rule, it's like, okay, if you do 10,000 reps or if you do 10,000 hours, boom, you will magically have masterful technique, right? But it's not necessarily the case, because those repetitions can be very different. So for instance, they found that people who were very high level swimmers, opposed to guys that were good swimmers, whatever, but that had spent sort of comparable time in the water, when they compared them, they asked them, well, what are you thinking about, like, when you're swimming, right? And some people would say, I'm just, thinking about, like, because it's repetitive, right? I'm thinking about being done with this. I'm thinking about, like, maybe going and doing something or letting my mind wander. But then when they talk to the elite swimmers, they were thinking about each stroke as they were doing, they were really focused on the actual movement of each stroke. So by the time the training session was done, they were freaking exhausted because they were so focused on doing each correctly. And so you can see that as a focus, right? And it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. You could go into jiu-jitsu and just roll around, but if you're not focused, you don't expect to get like better by keep going really fast. Your progress is going to slow down. And so a lot of times the focus is what I'm saying with a long time. A long time could be very different for everybody. I would say at least a month, at least a month on a technique or a particular position before you decide to move on to really see what you can do with it. And a month being assuming that you're training like 3 days a week. If it's a little bit less, maybe do the focus a little bit longer, but really be able to give it a fair shake. Because again, focus is what you're going to need to sort of put forward to actually get better at jiu-jitsu for the long term. What ends up happening a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, and this is true for other sports and activities, is people get to a certain point and then they get pretty good and then they start to chill out. They don't put themselves into uncomfortable situations as much. They've got really good with a particular position, so they don't really stray from it as much. They just kind of want to play their game, and that's what they do. And it really hinders their ability to grow because growth typically doesn't happen. This is true for a lot of different things, but growth in your skill doesn't really come from comfortable situations. It comes when you start to try to push the boundaries, right? It's when you're a myriad of different things. It's when you try to push just beyond where you're comfortable, right? Yep. You're not going too far where you just completely flop, but you're getting to the point where the whole situation is becoming very difficult and you've got to focus to improve, right?
Yep.
Opposed to just, this is cool. I'm just hanging out, just going at my own speed. And so that's kind of a thing. So when you're going to focus on a technique for a while, if you want to get good with one, you've got to be able to focus on it and this is the reason why a lot of times some jiu-jitsu practitioners get way better because they're not caught by shiny object syndrome where they want to try to dive around and do a bazillion different things. They have the ability to say, you know what, it's cool. The Instagram techniques, all that stuff, that's great. I just bought this instructional course, or my coach just showed this technique, or I just went to this seminar. I'm going to focus on this for like a month myself. And anytime I roll, I'm going to try to hit people in this particular choke that I learned. And then I'll start to go to the next thing or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Hey, so that kind of fed into the next point, which is willing to put themselves into uncomfortable positions because growth doesn't happen kind of where you're comfortable. And I think you had a great point about progress and like, first of all, focused progress or focused drilling, right? Like focused technique. Like if you're just drilling, you're not really paying attention to, some of the specifics. It's like, Roger Gracie's very, very good from closed guard, or he's got an X choke, right? And he's got things that he's very good at doing specifically, probably his hand placement or finger placement in the lapel. Those type of things are so perfect every time, and they're consistent every time. And I think that that repetition, that skilled repetition, the consistency of being able to perform the technique, even when the environment is not ideal, right? In multiple environments with somebody, in gi versus no gi, whatever, being able to do that. And really the consistency or the improvement is, can you do that with all the environment things shifting around? Can you perform a technique cleanly or properly, even if the placement of your opponent is not ideal? Can you position your body? Can you, change where you're at? So I think that's kind of important about that deliberate practice, is like you get good, in an ideal environment, and then you kind of extrapolate, and then you have to do in a more hectic environment is hitting it in a roll or during a tournament, right? That's kind of where things aren't ideal. And so I think when you can do that consistently, I think you've talked about as well, like, hey, I'm working on a sweep or something. So every roll, you're going to be working on that sweep. You're going to count how many times you've hit it or during the training session, that type of thing. So that's a good way to kind of see if your technique's starting to click.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things where for you guys that are on my email list and you get those ebooks in the beginning, one of them that I give away is I talk about an idea of like strategy for drilling, where it starts off at the very base level of doing a technique. And then you work up the chain to like fast repetitions where you're really moving quickly into the situation. And then eventually you try to hit it on white belts. And let's say if you're a purple belt, let's say as an example, because some of you guys are white belts, you won't be able to do this, but then you start on white belts, and then you start on blue belts, and you work your way up the technique work your way up the ladder. If you're a white belt, then obviously you start with the drilling and then you work with what you got as far as training partners in the beginning. But yeah, you have to be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations because, again, that's just where growth comes from. If you think about weight training, we have to constantly change the exercises because our body adapts to the stimulus. In jiu-jitsu, a lot of times people will complain about things like plateaus. They hit a plateau, they're not getting any better, and everybody else is getting better. Like, every time that I've ever seen that happen, it's almost always been the culprit of you're just doing the same stuff, right? You're just doing the same things over and over again. You're not changing anything up. You're not really focused with your training. You're just kind of going through the motions and you're showing up. And people are constantly, especially your training partners you train with on a regular basis, they're constantly adapting to you, whether they know it or not. And so if you're not changing something about your game, you're going to become very predictable and easy to beat. And so you've got to always like throw in a little extra spice every now and then to constantly change your game up. One, to improve yourself and to give yourself more options. But two, also, if you're trying to improve and, beat the people around you, which we all are trying to do, it's what makes jiu-jitsu fun and competitive, then you've got to change up your game. Otherwise, you're going to be, again, people adapt to your game largely in a lot of cases very quickly on a subconscious level, and then eventually they kind of consciously understand what's going on. But they adapt to you very fast, and so you have to change things up. And again, growth is typically coming from uncomfortable situations for ourselves, and that's typically where it comes from, jiu-jitsu or otherwise.
Cool. All right, let's see. Doesn't avoid the tough rounds in the gym.
Yeah.
I heard, this is the quote that I heard. I read it somewhere. I think it's from Heath Pedigo, and he said, if you're looking for the easiest roll in the gym, you are the easiest roll in the gym.
Yeah.
I believe he said that. But I was like, I was like, damn, that is that means something. That makes you think, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're like looking for the easy round, you are the easy round, something like that. But that's a tough one, man. Sometimes like you have you start talking to yourself like, oh man, I'm tired, right? Mm-hmm. I'm worn out, I'm not fresh. I gotta, but what is that? So as far as not avoiding tough rounds in the gym, say somebody is or having some issues or difficulty with getting some tough rounds, what's kind of some self-talk or anything that you do, kind of, because I feel like once you let that seep in a little bit, mm-hmm. it gets easier and easier to allow it to occur, right? So once you kind of like, I'm going to take the easier round, it gets easier for it to happen mm-hmm. again and again. It almost like it softens you a little bit. So what's your idea on that one?
Well, first off, let's talk about this, because I think there is something smart about selection of your roles sometimes.
Sure.
Because again, there are times where I might go with a really hard roll one round, and then I'll go with an easy roll one round, and then I'll go with a hard roll later on. I'll kind of undulate them a little bit. Or in the beginning of my training session, I might start with a couple easy rolls so I can get my body warmed up before I do the hard roll, so I'm less prone to injury, kind of like almost warm-up sets before I get to my working set.
Yep.
And so that can be a really good thing. So again, and this is dependent upon who you are and what level you're at. But a lot of times I try to have my toughest rolls somewhere after my second or third roll, because that's typically where I feel the best, I feel the warmest, and I feel the less prone to injury. So there's nothing wrong with being intelligent about the way that you pick the rolls. And also you got to think about it this way. If maybe you're picking an easy roll because you really want to try some brand new technique, well then, hey, there's a reason why you're doing that. But by you using techniques that you're not as experienced with, it's not going to be the easiest roll for you, because you're going to have to be very focused with it. Yeah. That said, when there are times where we have people in the gym that just have our number or that are very difficult to train with for us, and there can be that side of us that wants to avoid them, But the thing you got to think about, again, it goes back to, you're not going, those people, if they frustrate you, if they do these things, they are like the key to you getting better, whether you know it or not. Now, if they're dangerous and they injure people, that's one thing. That's a whole different set of problem. But assuming that they're just tough in a very technical way where they smash you and, destroy your guard and afterwards submit you, that's a good person to roll with, because they're going to make you improve. One of the things that I used to have a really tough time with one of my old coaches, Kyle. Kyle had a friggin' phenomenal guard. I mean, the guy was 200, he was anywhere between 200, 220, pretty much all the time. He's a big guy. He was very mobile, and he had a very, very crafty guard game. And I mean, it was murder, bro. I hated rolling with him to some degree because I mean, I enjoyed it because I tried, but I mean, I spent a lot of time with my head stuck between that man's crotch getting triangle choked because he seemed like he had a way of always getting me there, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, especially when I was kind of like the number 2 in the gym where I was like, I was next to him, I was the second best guy. It wasn't always fun to have to go take my butt whooping from him, but I did. But here's something to think about. Again, we get used to comfort. That's the issue. So, like when we came in as white belts, we knew we were going to get smashed, and we got smashed by everybody. And it just happened over and over again. And you were very used to it. You were like, this is what's supposed to happen. But then we get better, right? And then we get to a point where maybe we can hang with most people and we're not getting smashed. Then we're like, I don't want to roll with them because it's going to be uncomfortable and they're going to smash me. Then you get to that point where you get kind of soft mentally because you don't want to go those tough rounds because now it's like you're going to have to get your butt whooped a little bit. You got to fight against that. You got to bring back that white belt mentality of that. Yeah, sometimes you're going to get smashed and that's completely okay. And just go do it because it's going to make you better. We knew that as white belts, but then once we get to a certain point and we get better, we start to lose that. We can lose it if we're not careful. You know, and this is one of the reasons why, like, whenever we bring guys out for the gym, like seminar wise, I love trying to get a roll with them because it's always good to kind of, especially get like guys like JT Torres or something who can just, you know, they can beat me handedly. It's fun to have that feeling again to kind of like keep me in check too.
Yeah, there's some guy, you know, like Muhammad is one. It's just like he's strong, he's big, he's athletic, but he's also skilled.
Very technical.
He's also very, very skilled and technical, right? And like when you roll with a guy like that, you don't feel like you can tell he's not like giving you the business. He's just
he's not going.
He's
100%.
moving on you. He's not trying to, but he's like, it almost makes it worse sometimes. Like, oh, I know he's going like kind of really half speed, and he's still making me feel so stupid. And it's just, but it's fun because like then you realize like, oh God, there's there's just levels, and now it's more evident than ever. I mean, there's levels to this thing. We're seeing, you know, blue belts win the ADCC trials, right? It's like, oh, there's levels. There's levels. I mean, it's like some of these guys can make up time. I feel like that's what I've noticed. They're getting a little off topic, but like some of these guys can make up so much ground in so little time, right? Because there's so much exposure to training, to techniques, to tournaments where you get to test and retest, and that's kind of gives you such a way to kind of hone in on what you need to work on and such a way to improve.
Well, and also too, you got to think about these. We're also getting a number of athletes in the gym now, right?
Correct.
Like, so you know, you're attracting more athletes, and those people. Like, I had a guy come in today. He had never done jiu-jitsu a day in his life. There was a guy visiting from Australia this morning, and he came in and brought his buddy from Lexington, who he was hanging out with, and the guy from Lexington played like college sports. You know, it was like ball sports, so it had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, but he was catching on to all the movements like no problem, like perfectly, because his ability to set a mental representation of a technique by watching it was so good because he could sort of see it and then sort of understand how to put his body into those positions where a lot of times non-athletes can't do that as fast.
Correct.
And so, you know, you get a lot more of those in jiu-jitsu too, which only sort of speeds up the process. But and also the training, the quality of training, the quality of the gyms, the training methodologies, all of those have improved so much compared to, you know, 20 years ago when basically the only training methodology was like, all right, let's go really hard. That's it. Like just hard rolls. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're going to beat the crap out of each other. That's it. So
you're right. It's like the evolution of the sport. Like it's gotten better. It's like you watch people play basketball in the 1930s or whatever, and they're like dribbling up here and they're doing granny shots.
Watch basketball in like 1970s to very it's like 1990s. It's like it's a completely different world.
It's so crazy. It's so like that's a pretty extreme example. Even like you said, 20 years, right? 70 to 90. Think about jiu-jitsu being around. You know, a lot of us have trained. Some of us you trained 20 years. So you've seen it kind of like totally different. I mean, how much the quality has improved. So better. Well, and plus you have more people, right? You have more people doing jiu-jitsu now. So like, it's like you get to pick from a higher quality of I guess, you know, athlete or, you know, just in general, there's more people in there. So people are gonna get better.
The next one is is smart. A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner is smart enough to take rest days instead of trying to push their already exhausted body to the limit, since it leads to subpar training at best and injuries at worst. And so again, this is one of those things where a lot of times jiu-jitsu practitioners can be really archaic with their training, right? Like they just want to do more. Like a lot of times when I've talked to people, when they ask questions online, if they're experiencing like issues with their training, they're like, their only response is just to train more. Right. It's like, well, maybe you should take a day off, like, especially if you're getting to the point where you're ground down to the nub.
Yeah.
And I've run into a lot of people over the years who have had a lot of different injuries. And a lot of times the injuries will sort of be preceded by, oh, I was training really hard, really, really hard. And then like, it was like the third training session of the one day. And then I, tore something, opposed to, oh man, I'd been taking days off and I've been resting properly, whatever. It's like, it's usually not the case. And so you have to be smart about that. Cause again, you get one bucket of bones to take along for the ride, and you don't want to use it up too prematurely. And so there really is something important about taking rest days. And I can say this, that again, this is a hard learned lesson. When you take rest days, a lot of times when you come back from a day of rest, and when I mean rest, I mean like rest, like maybe you go for a walk or you do some stretching or something, but otherwise it's a very good, like, chill out day. You'll come back from those training sessions and dude, it's like your skills back. Like there's times where I'm training really hard and like, let's say I train on a Tuesday and I feel like crap, I can't submit anybody today. I'm just like struggling to do my normal stuff. Take Wednesday off. Like, all right, I'm not training Wednesday. I'll come back on Thursday and I'll feel like I'm on fire because my body's recharged. It's ready to go. I had a good night's sleep. I'm rested up. I didn't push the body. It could heal itself. And then when I get back, I'm ready to go, man. And it happens all the time. And the first time I think that I really started to appreciate this was I got sick because I was training too much, got sick, and then had to take several days off. And I came back, and I remember when I came back, bro, I felt so damn good. Even after getting a little sick, I had just like a little bug or something for a couple days. And then I took an extra day off just to be on the safe side. I came back and I felt amazing. This was like 5-6 years ago. And I remember coming back, I'm like, okay, maybe I should take more rest days because it really felt good with training like that. Plus, I felt like I got more out of the training session because I was so mentally dialed in and wired in, and opposed to just kind of going through the motions and being so mentally foggy and fatigued that I'm not actually able to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are, when they think about rest days, they think, oh, I need to physically rest my body. Well, you need to mentally rest your body too, like, or your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to like rest both, because I think like you've had like a really tough, like say a really tough training session or a weightlifting session.
Yeah.
Really hard training session. And then you're like your brain, like you said, is like foggy. You don't feel sharp. Right. And part of that is you've got there's a lot of neurological shit going on to keep, to hit the techniques or to stay focused on the techniques for training. I think you get some mental fatigue as well. And I think in some ways it's just a nice way to rest your mind. You rest your body and your mind. And I think you come sharper. You get a little hungrier too. Like if I'm forced to take some time off or not train the way I want to, that's kind of one of the nice sides of an injury. Injuries suck, and I hate them, and I'm going through one right now, which I've been trying to avoid. But it's one of those things where like I know I'm gonna be doing some things that it's gonna help me focus on my jiu-jitsu, and hopefully when I come back I'll be better. I'll be more focused, kind of more dialed in. I won't be as lagging if I've been overtraining.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said like talking about the brain, that's a good thing to add into it, because it's not just a physical rest. If you can do something like on my rest days, I typically try to do something that really relaxes me, that I enjoy doing. This could be like, taking a few minutes and like going outside and like laying in a hammock on a sunny day and relaxing, whatever it is, but doing something that relaxes me and sort of recharges my brain. Because when you're doing all this training, when you're doing all this technical work, it's not just the body that's experiencing changes. They've done a lot of different studies on the brains of different like athletes and people that are basically acquiring skills of certain sorts. And they found that a lot of times what's really interesting is there's a lot of brain changes, like the certain parts of the brain will actually grow depending on the activity. And they even did brain scans on people who were doing different activities. And they found that certain activities, like with, let's say, for instance, with musicians, I may have shared this on a recent podcast or not, I can't remember, but activities could take over huge swaths of the brain because you're doing them so much. And so your sensitivities become so heightened and your body has taken over some of the other sides of the brain to help contribute to this activity that you're doing. So it's 100% not just a physical thing. It's very much a mental thing. And again, it's all one thing at the end, right? You have your brain connected to your body. But you have to think about that because, exhausting your mind is 100%, taxing to you. Like, again, if you've ever done some really intense, like, mental sort of computation or some really creative work or something that's requiring a lot of brain energy, dude, you'll get done and you'll be exhausted. You'll feel like you've been working out or something, like your brain is just completely fried. And so absolutely, it's 100% a good idea when you're taking those rest days to try to take a complete rest day that allows you. And again, I'm not saying you can't work or you can't do anything, but at least at some point, try to do something that, really relaxes you and allows you to just like turn your brain off a little bit and recharge, whatever that might be.
Yeah. It doesn't mean, like I said, don't do anything. Like, don't just sit around, watch Netflix all day. Go like for a walk, get some type of stimulation, but it's got to be pretty relaxing. It can't be anything too crazy. All right. So next one is, the next quality is understands losing and failure is going to happen and doesn't let it create paralyzing fear or worry.
So a lot of people sometimes misunderstand what I talk about. So there's times where I'll talk about the fact that you can't be afraid to lose. And, there's people that'll disagree with me. It's like, oh, well, you have to be afraid to lose because otherwise you don't really want to win. And the reality is that, like, for instance, like when I compete, I hate losing. I hate losing at anything. I'm ultra competitive. Like, I'll be going for a jog and some guy will be running up on me. I mean, he's like getting ready to pass me. I'm like, not today. I'm going to beat him. Like I'm ultra competitive about everything that I do. I'm just that guy. But being afraid to lose and hating losing, completely different things. Being afraid of something, being fearful of something is paralyzing in itself. Not liking something, you don't like it, but you're not afraid of it, right? That's a different world completely. A lot of people are paralyzed by fears that they imagined or real that come up in their life. I mean, how many people, like, if you're listening to this, you may be one of those people that was afraid to go into your jiu-jitsu training session because you were paralyzed by fear of something that was completely made up in your head. And then afterwards, you're like, I really like jiu-jitsu. Why did it take me so long to do this damn thing, right? Maybe it wasn't jiu-jitsu, but a lot of us have experiences with that where we were fearful of something happening and it stopped us from doing the thing, right? So many people are paralyzed to do the things they want to do sometimes because of the fact that there's fear associated with it. Now, if they were like, well, I'm going to go do this thing and this thing might happen. I don't like that it happens, but it might happen. That's not such a bad place, right? And that's the thing with losing and failure. A lot of times people can become fearful of failure at certain points or fearful of losing. And there's nothing wrong with disliking failure, disliking losing, because again, nobody really enjoys it. It has a sting to it, right? It has an edge to it, which is why we actually listen to failure and listen to losing, because it actually makes us perk up and say, oh, what was that? Right? It's like touching the hot stove. It makes us take notice that something's wrong. But again, you can't be fearful of it. And that's the big differentiation between the two. And I think that sometimes people are fearful and it creates a whole mess of problems for them.
Yeah. How do you, and I've got some ideas, but like, how do you overcome the fear of, like, say, maybe even, say competing, right? I'm afraid to compete. What do I do? I'm okay training. I'm just doing it, but everybody wants me to compete, and I'm too scared to do it. Thought of the unknown, somebody hurting me on the mats or whatever. How do you overcome something like that? Like, if you maybe have a student that's kind of fearful.
You go do it. Like, whatever it is that makes you fearful, go do it. Like, that's how you get the power from it. I mean, it's real. So like, I have, when I was younger, I 100% guarantee, I bet I had some like weird social anxiety or something. Because I had all these little things that that just weird stuff that would kick up anxiety in me and would make me nervous.
Like what?
And here's a funny one, bro. This one, I laugh about this one all the time. This is funny. So I remember, so I didn't start drinking coffee until I was like in my like mid 20s, like early 20, like 24. Right. I remember one time I was like, you know, just it was like a nice summer day, and I was like, I want to go get a cup of coffee. I'm gonna go sit because I had about like an hour and a half before training. I was like, I'm gonna go sit and like I had a book I was reading. So I'm gonna go read a book and have a cup of coffee. For whatever reason, me going and sitting down in a coffee shop and reading a book made me anxious. Me ordering a coffee drink made me anxious, right? I don't know why. It just because I don't know anything about it, right? I felt awkward and uncomfortable. And I remember like it took me a while to get out of the car to go do it, right? So stupid. Now, eventually I went in there and guess what everybody was doing? They were freaking drinking coffee, reading books. It's so stupid, but nobody cared, right? Nobody cares. But there's been so many things and I can't think of them offhand, but there's been a lot of things that used to like drive up weird anxiety about stuff. You know, and then when I would do it, a lot of times, even if the thing didn't work out so well, it was fine, right? Even if it didn't work out, it completely was okay. It's like, you know, even like I remember being crazy scared my very first match. Like my very first match, holy moly, bro. I was so nervous. I was nervous wreck.
Jiu-Jitsu match?
No, like wrestling. I mean, I was nervous for my first jiu-jitsu match, but at that point, I at least knew what I was getting into. But my first wrestling match, bro, I felt like I was walking out to like an execution or something. Like I remember being in the back room, kind of like waiting. And I was just thinking, I wish I had a machine that could let me just fast forward to like 9 o'clock when the meet would be completely over and I could just be done with it. Cause I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, whatever. And I got beat my first match. Right. And I got pinned and I was okay. That's fine. Right. When the business stuff, I remember getting into the business stuff. I failed a bunch early on. It was okay. It's fine. Made mistakes along the way. Jiu-jitsu competitions have been beaten before. It's okay. You know, and I think that the more that you kind of just normalize failure, you normalize losing, and you just become, you don't love it. Nobody loves it, right? I'm not like, oh man, I love losing, right? And you know, I'm not one of those people that says you don't lose, you learn, right? Because no, dude, you lose. You took an L. Like own it. Like don't try to doll it up. It's supposed to sting a little bit, right? It's some bitter medicine, but it makes you better because you're going to take notice, right? Because you don't like that, and that's okay. That's good. And so again, kind of going back to, I think if you normalize it, so whatever it is that makes you nervous, go do it. Because a lot of times it's like I don't know which Stoic it was. I think it was Epictetus. He said, you know, people, and I'm paraphrasing here, people suffer in their imaginations more than they do in real life, right? And
Seneca.
so a lot of Seneca. Okay, so we a lot of times build situations up into something they're completely not, and then once we do them, it's completely fine. Even if the whole situation blows up in our face, we're completely fine, right? And I think that the more that you can do those things that sort of kick up that fear and that anxiety and stare it right in its face, the more and more you gain the power, you become a more powerful person, and the more you're able to simply look at it for what it is.
Yep. As far as specifically one thing that helped me as far as tournament prep and things like that, obviously, you know, hard rounds and training, but when we did like mock tournaments at the gym, like we'd start from standing, we'd have somebody like act like they were the ref, you know, I mean, people were around watching. I mean, you really simulated it and got your heart rate up. You're like, oh shit, everybody's watching. Everybody's going to, you know, see what goes down. So I think that was one thing. If you're someone that's just looking to compete and you haven't, or you're nervous about it, I think it's a great way to get your feet wet a little bit and like do like a little mock tournament with similar rule sets just to expose yourself a little bit to it.
Yeah.
All right. Next one is has a game plan of their style.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because you have a whole game plan
guide
ebook. Yeah. Tell us like, well, you know, obviously you want to have, there's a lot that goes into it, and I have some ideas, but I'll let you kind of go at it first.
So I mean, it becomes more and more complex as time goes on. But in the beginning, it's just simply knowing your best techniques. It's simple as that. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just basically means that whenever you end up in a particular place, you know what you're supposed to do. So for instance, what's your best guard sweep? What's your best takedown? What's your best escape? You know, these sorts of things. Just having some basic idea of what is it that you do the best. Now, obviously, if you're brand new, you're not going to know. But as you experiment more and more and more, you should come to know what your game is, because you've got to know who you are, what kind of style you have. Because if you understand that, then, and if you get into jiu-jitsu, you know, and ideas and stuff more and more, you can understand how does your style work against someone else. So for instance, I know my style very well. And so when I face a particular opponent, I know where my strengths and weaknesses are, and I know where I need to be against that person, right? Because I'm like, okay, this person has really good leg locks. I have okay leg locks. They're not bad, but they're not excellent. And so I don't want to play that game with them. This person, really kills people with their standing passing. So I'm going to play low passing instead, right? And so just understanding how your game works. So this way, when you go against someone, you can understand how to chip away at them and that sort of thing. And so again, you start to develop this more and more as you get going. But in its base rudimentary form, it just means what is your technique from all the basic positions that you would use, and then from there it kind of grows into something.
I think a great a great thing. Sometimes you'll fall into techniques; they'll just kind of feel natural to you, and then like having people at the gym with similar body styles that are maybe a little more advanced. You can kind of. I had a guy at Rich Shabowski was my guy that I would follow because we had similar build.
Yeah,
and I really liked his style, and I felt like he did a lot of the things that I did in training. He did them a little better.
Right.
He was, so he is a guy that I would kind of really always enjoy working with or rolling with. And so find somebody at the gym that maybe, and you can still learn from anybody. Like Chewy, you have a very different build than I do. However, like there's parts of I really love playing butterfly, especially in Nogi. I love playing butterfly. And then, you play butterfly, you play some single X or X guard. You do some X guard too. Yeah. I like that stuff. So you can definitely, pick up things from anybody, but even like some of these, professionals that are out there training at a very high level. I mean, Marcelo Garcia is a guy that, he didn't have the same build as me, but I liked watching him, picking up things from him. So it might be somebody with similar body style that you find that you like. But certain things felt natural. Like for me, like a loop choke felt natural. I don't think anybody taught me a loop choke. I just started doing it for some reason. I figured it out. So part of that's just exploration, is playing around, tinkering, right? And part of it's looking at body style, and part of it's game playing. You've done it long enough to where like I have these parts of my game. This is what I need to do. It's like I need to use this attack against this person, or this defense against this person, which is kind of interesting. It's like a video game essentially in some aspects. You're using certain. I'm gonna pack up these skill sets or these armors or these weapons, right?
You can think of it like a tool, like a toolbox, right? It's like,
yeah, for sure.
You're solving an issue, and when a craftsman runs into an issue, he's like, all right, look at this. Okay, I need this particular tool, and they pull it out and they use it. And your techniques and positions are tools. And so you have to, as you train more and you become more knowledgeable about how your tools work, you'll be able to find which tools are the best for the particular situation.
Right.
And this is why, I will play certain positions against big guys versus small guys, certain positions against guard pullers versus guard passers, that kind of thing.
Right. Cool. Go next. I lost my list. Hang on a second.
The next one is works to improve their diet and lifestyle just as they improve their techniques. So this one maybe isn't for everyone, but I find that a majority, probably like the 80% of jiu-jitsu, tend to get into it, and they're not the most disciplined people when it comes to their lifestyle and their diet and everything else, right? It's a lot of times it's people. I've seen a lot of people who get into jiu-jitsu that are, they're getting into jiu-jitsu because it's something that they can do that allows them to be athletic and do stuff without actually feel like they're exercising, right? But the issue is that your body is the vehicle by which you explore jiu-jitsu. And not just your body, but your mind is also affected by your food and your eating habits as well.
Absolutely. 100%.
And so if you're not taking care of your diet, your lifestyle, this means like your food, your sleep, your everything else, you can't expect optimal results from your training. And I think that a lot of times people ignore this stuff. This is sort of something with our society as a whole. It's like we're looking for some magical supplement to where we don't have to sleep and we don't have to eat well. We can just drink a protein shake and take something, and then we'll just be able to just go on no sleep. And it doesn't work that way. Sleep is massively important. Your diet's very, very important. Those are cornerstones, and a lot of people don't pay attention to those as much. And I think that a lot of people, if they put more focus, and here's an example of this in action. So as I've gotten older, one of the things I've experienced, which a lot of older people can attest to, is that your sleep quality begins to suffer a bit.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I was 18 years old, I would sleep and I I'm done. I'm out for the count, right? As I've gotten older, I found that like my brain sometimes races. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night. I have a little bit more trouble going to sleep, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, and even a few months ago, I was having trouble sleeping. It was weird. And so I had to really be mindful of my sleep hygiene. And so, like, I've got lamps around the house that have a particular type of bulb in them.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to be like, it's supposed to fight off the blue light kind of stuff. I don't do certain activities past a certain time. My phone goes on the charger and it's not by the bed. All these different things to basically improve the quality of my sleep. And trying to dial it in just like I would dial in a technique and say, okay, like, okay, let's try this and see how this works. Let's try this and see how this works.
Yeah.
Did this add something to it? Just as an example, and even with the diet, it's been very much the same way. We're finding different foods that seem to work for me, that seem to allow me to train hard and don't seem to kick up too much inflammation in my body. Like I'm always tweaking that stuff out. So
Yeah, those are kind of like low hanging fruit. You know what I mean? Like sleep's a low hang. It's like you've got genetics, right? You can't pick your genetics. I mean, you're just born with what you're born with. These, the size you are. Or, I mean, there's some obviously you can, but certain things they're just like there's people that are better athletes. No matter how good you try, how hard you try, they're better athletes. But like they may have a shitty diet, or they may not sleep right, or they may be drinking a lot of alcohol, and and that all can impact your recovery and how rested you are. So if you got somebody that's just fatigued, they're worn out, they're kind of burning the candle at both ends, and maybe doing things that aren't good for themselves, and you're fresher and maybe a little sharper that day. I mean, there's no reason why you can't be better.
Yeah.
So I think that can kind of help. Those things kind of help level the playing field in a lot of ways, can make it, make it better for yourself. And that's why you see like younger athletes, like, when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and I was training jiu-jitsu, I would not take care of myself as much. I wouldn't put as much emphasis or a focus on those things. I would, I drank the night before or whatever. Now I'm like, hey, I cannot have any alcohol or whatever, like, or it's going to really impact me. I even if I do a little bit, I feel it the next day, like I'm not as sharp. So, and then sleep's another huge thing. Huge. I mean, I think in quality of sleep too.
Yeah.
And that, like, that's like changing your environment, I think, is what you're talking about. So when you're taking a lot of these things that are kind of that you could get away with, right? Having the TV on or watching TV right before falling asleep, that kind of thing. But now it's like, hey, that could throw me off completely. I can't afford that, right? So
no TV in the bedroom. Got blackout curtains. We keep the temperature pretty low, so it's nice and cool. There's all these little things, and again, they're just little tweaks. But again, when you're trying to optimize as much as you can, just everything. I mean, like our body, like it's the best. Like everybody wants to go to supplements and stuff like that, but your body does the best job at repairing itself and getting itself. And so if you give it everything that it needs to do all that stuff, you'll be more refreshed. You'll train better. You'll feel better. You'll be more mentally there. I mean, all kinds of beautiful things that you want will happen. And so you got to focus on them just like you would a technique.
Yep. I agree.
So the next one is a smart jiu-jitsu practitioner takes part in physical conditioning to improve the strength and ability of their body, since BJJ is dictated by the health and abilities of their body. Kind of continuing on with what we said last time, but now instead of just like diet and your lifestyle of living and everything else, now you're saying, okay, you're also taking part in like strength conditioning, cardio or whatever it might be, to improve the abilities that you have with your body, that kind of stuff. And it's super important because, again, you can have all the technique in the world, but jiu-jitsu is dictated by your body, right? So let's say that you're not strength training, you're not stretching, you're not doing extra cardio, you're not doing these things. It makes you more prone to injury, so you can't train as much. And then when you go up against someone that is more physically imposing, you don't have an answer for it because physicality matters. Technique's king, but physicality does matter. And again, it just creates issues. And so again, it's one of those things where, if you're just one of these people that wants to be better at something, right? Nobody, I think, signs up because they want to just be mediocre. I mean, people do become mediocre and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think anybody really signs up for that, And if it's one of those things where if it's your intention to be the best that you can possibly be in jiu-jitsu, then obviously strength training and conditioning and doing some different stretching and different things like that, that's going to be an important thing for you. when you're training and mixing that into the mix. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be excessive, right? You don't have to lift as much as me. I lift like 4 days a week. You don't have to do that. It could be like simply once or twice a week at the bare minimum, right?
Yeah, it depends on your goals too. Like I think you can lift for maintenance as well. Like
Sure.
you can lift, you can lift to build strength and muscle, which is what you should, ideally that's the goal, is to be stronger, be healthier, have a little more strength in those muscles, those tendons that you can kind of, really protect your joints a little better. But again, like you could lift just because, like you even said, like, hey man, I started lifting, I started squatting again, in like a different way, more controlled way, or you change some things up and your knees felt better.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like, I think like loading your joints and forcing the joints to work a little bit, like your knees, in a controlled and a safe way, having proper mechanics is healthy for you. It actually can help maintain the cartilage. I saw an article and they said like it was about jiu-jitsu people running, and why you shouldn't run if you're a jiu-jitsu person. And I was like, whoa. You can't just say that. It's a blanket statement. Like you can't just say running is bad.
What was the point in the article?
The article was like, well, that there's basically other forms of cardio that maybe aren't as like tough on your body. I think that like I think running can very much be helpful. Like for me, and I kind of, since I'm going to be a little bit limited in my training right now, how aggressively I train, I started running again, and it was rough. But like I know that like for me, I have pretty decent running mechanics, and I kind of know what to pay attention to and properly run, because a lot of jiu-jitsu people should not run because their mechanics are horrible. Their knees don't extend, Chewy. Their knees don't straighten all the way. Maybe they have a lot of limitations in their hips, where they can't get a good stride. They can't land properly. So that, like, I think running can be a good supplement, but maybe not your kind of your go-to thing. Maybe you do a recumbent bike or like a stationary bike or something like that. But like for me, running has always been very helpful, and I feel like it really helps, like that low steady state of cardio really helps my overall cardio, just to perform. So I think cardio is a huge thing. I think it's just as important, if not more important, than strength in jiu-jitsu. I think cardio is probably the I don't know. For me, it's one thing that I know, like if I haven't trained for a while, if my cardio is kind of depleted some, that's where that can really, because that doesn't only physically impact you, it mentally impacts you, and you start like, oh shit, I'm tired, and you can start kind of talking yourself out of some stuff. So I think cardio, and especially running for me, because I hate it. So it's a mental struggle as much as a physical struggle for me, because to keep going, it's like I'm having basically I'm having a conversation with myself about stopping and walking, right? When I'm like, I could push through, I got more in the tank. So it's just what you choose, I think what you choose, and whatever's best for your body. But running isn't inherently bad for your knees. They've actually shown that like it can help keep your cartilage healthy. But again, it depends on how much you run, your running mechanics, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do the bike, and then I like doing hill sprints.
Yeah, why not?
Those I don't. And if I do run, typically it's like sprints in the grass.
Yeah.
I love doing those because I've got the yard now, so I can just run through it. But yeah, cardio is important because again, if you're not doing cardio, if you've ever been in that situation where you run out of steam, you can't keep moving. Most of the time, when you see people, like when you watch a roll, typically it's the person that never stops moving that wins.
Yeah.
The person that continuously keeps moving at their pace.
Yeah, it's tough. Fatigue makes cowards of us all.
That's right.
Nobody's immune to that.
And the last one, guys, trains hard but does not intentionally. A smart jiu-jitsu practitioner trains hard but does not intentionally risk their training partner's health. So very simple. I mean, it's a very simple idea, but you have to be mindful of your training partners, because essentially when you and your training partner, each one of you guys are separate entities, but then at one point you are joined together as one, right? And without each other, you can't get better, right? Without each other, you guys can't grow. And so if you don't take care of your training partners, you're left with no training partner. That you can't create that cohesive unit that helps you improve.
Yep.
Right. And so You've got to be mindful of it. So like when you train hard, you should go hard, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but then there should be these points where if you feel something's off or whatever, you stop. Like, hey, is everything all right? And then if you're getting ready to do a submission, you slow down on the extension part of it, right? Where you're finishing it off. A lot of times with the training partners in the gym that I have, like all the ones that I train with really hard, we'll be in the middle of a really good back and forth, whatever. And then if like one of us feels something's off, we might be, you okay? Like, or
Yep.
maybe I accidentally hit you. Hey, bro, you okay? Or, I mean, hell, we'll feel a toe get stuck in the gi or something. We'll say, let me stop real quick. We're mindful of those situations because you have to be, because again, the worst thing in the world is to hurt your training partner with something that was completely preventable. It's one thing if it was an accident, but to hurt your training partner when it was completely preventable because you weren't exercising proper caution, that's like, it's one of the worst. And so, yeah, if you're smart about it, because if you take care of your training partners, you'll be able to train for a long time. So if you're smart about it, you'll take care of them.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you talked about when you get a little more experience, you can read the body language, read the cues. You can feel when somebody's like not giving you a typical, somebody that you've trained with for a while, they're not giving you a typical response that you would expect. You can kind of, you can kind of have almost like that spider sense, a spidey sense in there, and like reading the cues. But that's the one thing when you were talking, I was like, we always, jiu-jitsu is a solo sport. It is, but it really isn't. Like you can't get there on your own, So I mean, when it comes down to it, like winning the gold medal, yes, you win it, but man, you can't do it without the people around you. If you don't take care of them, have a good gym environment where you enjoy going in and good coaches that support you, you're going to be nothing.
Well, I think it's an idea like with life, right? Life is like, it's relationships. It's like each one of us is living out our own sort of like movie in our head, right? We're all experiencing our own existence, but you can't really do life alone, right? Like humans are social creatures, and we can't get by ourselves. We have to have other people with us. And it typically, if you don't have anybody in your corner, it typically doesn't work out very well. And in our life, right, every relationship, it's like these two entities join together, right?
Yeah.
And it's the energy that we both give to it that keeps it alive. Like if you and your spouse, for instance, right? There's each one of you guys are separate, and then there's the relationship in the middle. And as you pull energy into it and you give it attention, that thing grows. If you don't, and you do something to sour it, the thing dies away.
Yeah.
And so our relationship with our training partners, right? There's each one of you guys, but then there's this training relationship that's in the middle. And as you guys push energy into it, as you put your effort into it, as they put their effort into it, this thing grows and it becomes this very productive thing that makes you better at jiu-jitsu. But if you do something to sour it, like rip an armbar too fast or something like that, that situation is probably going to change, and they're probably going to pull back because they're not going to want to train with you.
Yeah.
And it's going to be your fault, or you might injure them and they may not be able to train with you, period.
Yeah. It's like the relationship piece that you just mentioned is like, it's not something that a lot of us get into jiu-jitsu knowing that we desire or we need or we want, right? It's just something like when you're at a good gym, that's probably a lot of the reason why people stick around. If you didn't build those relationships with your coaches and training partners, you didn't love seeing those people at the gym and generally like catching up with them and training with them, and working hard with them, you wouldn't stick around, or that's why you find a new gym.
Yeah.
And then when people come in and they're not a cohesive part of the gym, they're kind of there for themselves, and you can hide that for a while, that you can kind of mask it, and then eventually your true colors will come out, because you're not always going to be on top of your game, and you'll see that. And sometimes that's where you see people leave gyms or move to a gym or whatever. But I think like a lot of the reason why somebody like myself, that has done jiu-jitsu, and I think I've been a hobbyist from the start, whether I like to admit it or not. I've competed and everything. I love to compete, and that's something that's on the radar for me, but I'm still going to compete as a hobbyist. I'm not going to be a world champion, but like the relationships, right? Me and Adam starting this thing together out of, like knowing each other for years and kind of doing this jiu-jitsu thing together, and then meeting people along the way, and then meeting other people. And I think it's just part of you just keep having these relationships with people that you love hanging out with, not just to do jiu-jitsu with. You actually like seeing them outside of the gym, and supporting them outside of the gym, which is freaking cool. But yeah, the relationships, I think, are one of the most valuable things that come out of this community that we're in.
I mean, it's most of the time, I think it's one of the big cornerstones that actually keeps people training. I think you take out the relationships with people, and again, typically falls away. I mean, again, humans are just such social creatures.
Yeah.
And, relationships with people are a big reason why we stick to a lot of the things that we do in life, right? All right, guys. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully you got something from it. Hopefully there was an idea that you can chew on for a little bit that'll get you to think a little bit differently about your game or your training or whatever it might be. Again, thanks to our sponsors that help make the podcast possible. Charlotte's Web. You can check them out at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 to get 20% off your order. And again, my encouragement to you is to try it out for a month. If you've never tried CBD before, try it out for a month, see what kind of effects you have on it, and then kind of go from there. Also, thanks to Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off your order on any of their Jiu-Jitsu gear and apparel, minus any of their special stuff that they do related to like Mason Fowler, McDojo. Everything else the discount works for, so check them out. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns is an app that modernizes the way you manage your finances. It works in the background of your life by combining banking and investing into one seamless experience. Basically, every time you get paid, Acorns can invest a piece of that. And every time you make a purchase, Acorns can invest your spare change into portfolios that grow with time. Start with investing with Acorns and get a $20 bonus in investments when you sign up at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu with a $5 investment. So again, when you invest $5, you get a $20 bonus just for signing up, again, by going to acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. And again, remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. And for further information and disclosures, you can visit acorns.com. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com. And guys, again, if you want to support the podcast directly and get access to a bunch of free content, including a seminar that's going to be uploaded up there soon, a recording of one of my seminars in West Virginia, check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And if you would like to jump on my email list that we mentioned a ton this episode, go to jujitsu.net/join, JOIN, and you can get access to that. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll talk to you next time.